Good morning and welcome to the second day of Green Industrialization Conference by UNCTAD SPRC. Before the start of the proceeding, I would like to request Mr. Waqar Bukhari to recite few verses from the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah ji. My name is Ijaz Ahmad. I am working as the Director Research Programs at SPRC. On behalf of Executive Director SPRC, Dr. Safdar, Sohail, myself and my team, we welcome you all in this second day of the Green Industrialization Conference. We had a very good participation on the day first of the Green Industrialization Conference, and we really appreciate all the delegates who are attending this conference from Islamabad and other cities and provinces. Thank you so much, and we hope that today's session would be much more engaging and exciting, and we are mindful of the fact that yesterday there was less time for Q&A and participation of the conference attendees was limited because of the time constraint, but today we will take care of that. With these words, I'll introduce the session, which is benefiting better from international climate finance. Climate finance is a very important topic, especially in these times when climate catastrophes are affecting in global south as well as in global north. And this is very crucial time, especially with reference to loss and damage fund, which is going to be established very soon. So I would like to hand over the session to Dr. Safdar Sohail, Executive Director, SPRC, who would be moderator of the session, and he would also call upon the speakers on the stage. Over to Dr. Safdar Sohail.
Thank you, Ijaz. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear guests, it's my personal pleasure and honor to welcome you all on the second day of our conference. As we have a very heavy panel speaking on a very important topic, I would not take much time to go into details. We, as a part of the project, have carried out a study on benefiting better from the soon-to-be established loss and damage fund. I'll just highlight some of the key insights that this study has produced. This study has been shared with all the panelists. We would organize this session in the form of a panel. and I'm grateful and very happy that the key person in terms of the establishment of Loss and Damage Fund, that is our Additional Secretary, United Nations at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Government of Pakistan, Syed Haider Shah is with us. Thank you very much, Haider, to chair the session. And let me briefly introduce Syed Haider Shah. Mr. Syed Haider Shah has been a member of the Foreign Service of Pakistan since 1995 and has worked in various locations, including Islamabad, New York, New Delhi, and Kathmandu. He is currently stationed in Islamabad as ASUN. In addition to diplomatic experience, he has also pursued higher education in law, obtaining an LLM degree from Harvard Law School in 1998, a postgraduate diploma in international law and organization of economic policy. He is the author of The Resistible Rise of Market Fundamentalism with Paul and The Case for a New Bretton Woods with Kevin, and is co-editor of the Oxford Handbook on Industrial Policy. We are really happy and excited to have him with us. Richard, please come over the stage. Thank you. We would soon be joined by Mr. Mohsin Chandna, DG Debt, Ministry of Finance. They have an auction of treasury bills today, a heavy one, so he would still find time with us. Mr. Mohsin Chandna is an officer of the Pakistan Administrative Service with a blend of experience at home and Pakistan mission abroad. He retired in BS22 as Federal Secretary IT after over 34 years of government service. He holds the degree of Masters of Public Policy from University of Chicago, as well as Master of Business Administration from IBA, Karachi. Mr. Mohsin has previously worked as Secretary at Ministry of Information Technology and Interprovincial Coordination. He has also worked as Special Secretary, Ministry of Finance, where he was heading debt and budget wings. He has also served as Economic Minister in Embassy of Pakistan, Washington, for over 5 years and was dealing with IMF in that capacity. He has also served as DG National Institute of Management, Karachi, when I was DG NIM Islamabad, and Secretary Planning, Government of Sindh. And currently he is holding a critical position of DG Debt, Government of Pakistan. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce my friend Dr. Nadeem Javaid, Professor of Strategy and Economics, Karachi School of Business and Leadership, Karachi. He is the outgoing Chief Economist of the Planning Commission, but I think as your resign has not yet been accepted, we can still call you Chief Economist of the Government of Pakistan. Nadeem has an experience of over 20 years comprising teaching, research, consulting, central banking, and policy making. He served as the Chief Economist of the Government of Pakistan with the responsibility to advise the highest decision-making forums such as Central Development Working Party, Executive Committee of National Economic Council, ECNEC, as we all know, National Economic Council, and Federal Cabinet. He also supervised the investment programming of around 1,300 projects pertaining to social development, higher education, IT, energy sector, governance, and infrastructure, with an annual development budget of rupees 800 billion and a throw forward of rupees 6.5 trillion. And I may also share that he has played and is playing a critical role in SCIF also. So Dr. Nadeem, please come to the stage. And we have Dr. Amanullah with us, Chief Economist, Government of Punjab. Dr. Amanullah completed his MPhil in economics from Qaeda University, Islamabad, and later went on to earn a PhD in economics from the University of Auckland, New Zealand. He is the author of several publications and recipient of many scholarships and grants. Currently, Dr. Aman is serving as Chief Economist, as I just said, of the P&D Department, Government of Punjab, along with being the focal person of the Government of Punjab for Sustainable Development Goals, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, Growth Strategy, and Ease of Doing Business Reform Agenda. So he is focal point for 4 very critical initiatives. And I'm particularly happy that he could spare 2 days for us because we requested him yesterday also to be the speaker in the inaugural session, and the provincial level in terms of climate finance is also extremely important. So particularly happy to have Dr. Aman with us. And he combines the research aspect also, and he is looking after the Punjab Economic Research Institute and Punjab Bureau of Statistics also. Dr. Aman, thank you very much for being with us. It's my pleasure to introduce again Mr. Bilal Anwar, who is the CEO of National Disaster Risk Management Fund, Government of Pakistan, Islamabad. Again, this fund is extremely critical for the government. He would be joining us shortly because he is also in a meeting, but it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Bilal Anwar, CEO of National Disaster Risk Management Fund and an international climate policy practitioner. Previously served in UN, the Commonwealth and private sector in shaping up the international climate finance mechanisms, carbon financing and carbon market regimes. Implemented some global scale climate change and substantial sustainable development projects in many parts of the world. He would join us around 12. And last but not the least, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Ahmad Ammar Yassar, Chief of Party UNIDO for the project Private Sector Energy Project here in Islamabad. Mr. Yassar is a licensed professional engineer working in the areas of clean energy and industrial productivity sector since 2007. He has worked on more than 25 projects, including 5 mega projects having more than 25 beneficiaries. With accumulative power generating and saving demand release impact of 700 plus megawatts. He has been instrumental in the establishment of Pakistan's first solar energy services company. He has authored proposals that have won grants through international comparative processes from agencies such as EU, World Bank, USAID, PSI, etc., resulting in securing rupees $10 million worth of grants. Currently, as Chief of Party, he is helping a pipeline of 48 clean energy projects of $880 million plus to achieve financial closure. Mr. Yassar, we're very happy to have you. Please come on the stage. On my special request, Mr. Sajjad Mughal, who represents the private sector, and as in any climate finance discussion these days, private sector and private finance both are extremely important. So Mr. Sajjad Mughal, CEO of Classical International Trading, Lahore, is with us to participate in this panel also. Mr. Mughal is a seasoned entrepreneur, business strategist and private sector development specialist with over 25 years of experience in designing and implementing innovative financing solutions for the decarbonization of manufacturing processes. He is currently the CEO of Classical International Trading, a profitable and fast-growing startup that offers industrial chemicals trading and indenting services in Pakistan and beyond. With a strong academic background and a deep understanding of the global policy and economic environment, Mr. Mughal is a recognized expert and leader in the field of sustainable development goals. He has won several international awards and authored Pakistan's national SME policy and the first implementation plan of that SME policy. He is passionate about creating positive social and environmental impact through his work and partnerships and driving phenomenal growth in the industrial chemicals trading sector. We're very happy to have you here with us, Mr. Mughal. Please come to the stage. Now, SPRC and UNCTAD, we are both as your hosts and as organizers of this event and as the implementer of the UNCTAD projects of green industrialization are extremely happy that we have such a galaxy of distinguished experts, representatives. While designing this session, I was aware that climate finance is a very complex, multidimensional, sensitive, difficult subject, as well as extremely important. And as we all know, recently there was a report that Pakistan has not been able to benefit from the opportunities of international finance a lot. So this session has been designed to take care of most of the aspects in terms of the preparations that Pakistan should have to better avail from the existing opportunities and the forthcoming opportunities, loss and damage fund being one of that. I've just seen my friend Francesco Zata from the Italian embassy, who is heading the development cooperation. Thank you, Francesco, for coming. In the project, we yesterday shared with you the studies that have been carried out. So as a part of the project, we had one study on climate finance, how to better avail from the opportunities which are there. Yeah, please put on the Alishba. This is the summary of the findings? Yes. Okay. Give me the sheet there, the black and white. But as this is an important topic, so I would like to read it out, our findings. It's a study of which the first draft has been already produced and shared with all the speakers. And we expect that the speakers would give their critical comment on the study. So the study is titled, Preparing Pakistan to Avail Loss and Damage Fund for Green Transformation. Alishba, this slide is not the same one. Please bring up the slide, Key Insights from the Study, Preparing Pakistan to Avail Loss and Damage Fund for Green Transformation. I'll read it out. These are the key insights of our study. Developing countries are projected to incur significant climate change costs, with annual estimates reaching $435 billion by 2030 and $1 trillion by 2050. COP27 resulted in the creation of the Loss and Damage Fund, a significant turning point, hopefully, acknowledging the inequities of climate change. Now, despite making a very small contribution to global greenhouse gas emissions, Pakistan ranks among the top 10 most climate-affected countries. The devastating 2020 floods underscored the urgency of establishing climate finance for the Loss and Damage Fund. Still, Pakistan gets very little from international climate finance. And the purpose of this session and of this study is that let us make a difference. Because to maximize the climate resilient development through Loss and Damage Fund, Pakistan must, why we have not been able to access climate finance, we have dealt in detail in our study. And we feel that to maximize climate resilient development through the Loss and Damage Fund, Pakistan must enhance its understanding of global climate finance. That's the first thing. We need a better understanding of eligibility criteria and internal distribution priorities. Our technical knowledge and institutional capacity was an additional challenge. We have the challenge on the international side, but the added challenge is that our own technical knowledge and institutional capacity is weak in attracting climate finance, which otherwise is challenging. We did not do well to avail funds like under Clean Development Mechanism. All of you know that we benefited very little from CDMs. We have a whole chapter on that. We also could not benefit much from the carbon credit markets, or for that matter, now there is a lot of open discussion that we have not been able to benefit from the foreign aid as such also. And we have dealt in detail in our study. So as loss and damage would be different from climate funds focused on mitigation and adaptation, as it would address losses and damages that cannot be mitigated or adapted. Pakistan would need to engage the relevant transition committee, which is developing the modalities to enhance the prospects of funding for Pakistan. That also is a one chapter that is there. And with a lot of deference to the speakers at the podium, I would request them to keep the climate financing for mitigation and climate financing for adaptation out of today's discussion. We would like to focus more on preparing for loss and damage fund and addressing our domestic issues that we have. Now, for example, one of the key eligibility criteria of loss and damage fund would require the countries like us to establish effective mechanisms such as impact monitoring, need assessments, and criteria for progressive and sustainable initiatives. Therefore, the fund management agencies in Pakistan would play a critical role to ensure the compliance requirements, which would be gauged through measurement, reporting, and verification systems. So we would require an MRV system there. And we strongly urge and believe that as the transitional committee takes time in accomplishing the challenging task of making practical decisions, we need to quickly learn from others and from our own experience and failings. While waiting for an additional fiscal space through loss and damage fund, we would help ourselves greatly if we ourselves mobilize our own resources, particularly at the provincial level, where there are supposedly a lot of resources, for a low carbon and climate resilient transition, which could be then scaled up when we get more funds from loss and damage fund. And finally, with better mobilization of our domestic resources and attending to the expenditure side, that is also extremely important. We can get the funds, but how do we spend? Attending to the expenditure side through effective governance, we can start making a significant difference in the lives of our people. And we conclude in our study that this requires a serious revisit of our current debt-dependent public finance management system. And that brings me to the first speaker, that is Richard, our friend, that the current model of debt-dependent public finance management is embedded in a global financial system where we have a subset of that global financial system, which we popularly call financing for development, in which UNCTAD has also contributed a lot. So we would start with that international context, and I hand over to Richard for a 10-minute comment, which I will request all the other speakers also to restrict themselves between 8 to 10 minutes, because we'd like to have a better discussion, which is the spirit of the panel discussion also. So it's over to you, Richard, if you would like to come here or, okay.
Thank you, Dr. Sohail. This is a huge topic. I think from yesterday's discussion, we know that of all the constraints on making a transition to a low or zero carbon economy, finance is the binding constraint. And when we come to look at and it's a very complicated question, it involves domestic and international financial arrangements. It involves the different challenges with respect to mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage. It involves the problems of debt versus grants and OD. It's a very complicated field, the financing issue. The bottom line, at least for us, is that we do not have an international financial system as it's currently designed that is capable of delivering finance, particularly to developing countries, on the scale that is needed. And the scale is huge. The estimates obviously vary tremendously, but the global estimate is in the order of something like $3 to $4 trillion a year to meet the climate and the SDG goals. And it's very important for developing countries that climate is not financed at the expense of development goals. And there's a real danger right now that the advanced economies are looking to redesign the international financial system in a way that is better adjusted to meet financing goals, but will fail to meet development goals. And that's something that developing countries, I know, the G77 in particular, are very conscious of and very worried about, and so they should be. I mean, I was at Marrakesh, as I said last week, and the way in which the World Bank is being rejigged is very much in the direction of crowding out traditional development finance by refocusing the mandate of the bank on climate-heavy projects. And so that's a huge concern, I think, that we have. I think the second big issue that is involved always in this discussion is the way in which private and public finance are combined. And both of these have to be scaled up significantly if we're to meet the investments required, particularly for mitigation and adaptation. The discourse on this, again, we are not comfortable with in UNCTAD. The discourse that comes out particularly from Washington, but also from the private financial sector, is that governments don't have the money to make the investments in climate mitigation and adaptation, and therefore we have to depend on the private sector, which has loads of money to make investment. This is a very misleading agenda. So somebody like Mark Carney, who was the head of the Bank of England and is now a special advisor to the UN Secretary General on climate financing, went to the Glasgow and they created the GFANZ, which is the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, claiming that he had $130 trillion worth of financial assets, that if we were nice to bankers and to asset managers, by being nice we meant if governments gave them a bit of money, they would channel their resources into climate financing. That's the logic of de-risking and public-private partnerships and the language that dominates much of that. And it's mythical, largely. I mean, if you look at the evidence on public-private partnerships, for example, from the World Bank, the bank claims that for every dollar of public-private financing the World Bank would provide, the private sector would provide $4 to $5 of complementary investment. The evidence suggests that so far, at least, for every dollar of World Bank financing in public-private partnerships, the private sector has provided about 60 to 70 cents of complementary financing. So the idea that somehow the private sector is going to channel the money that it's invested in equities and real estate, which is where a large chunk of private investment is invested, and will suddenly start building renewable energy plants in Tanzania, is just completely mythical. Unless the private sector, unless the public sector, builds up its own capacity to invest in mitigation and adaptation, and as a complementary part of that story, has sufficient regulatory and oversight capacity to make sure that private investment goes into what is needed. And what is needed is investment in stuff. It's not investment in financial assets. That's not going to solve the climate problem. What we need is investment in new sources of energy, in different ways of producing goods and services, in new forms of transportation, etc., etc. That's what we need. We need investment in real stuff. And that's not happening. And I think a lot of our frustration with that discourse is that it undermines the significance of public investment and sources of public financing. And in this area, UNCTAD has insisted that the role of public development banks at the national, regional, and international level are critical to ensuring that enough financing is available for long-term difficult investments, which is what we're talking about. Climate investment is not an easy task. It's as you all know, it's a very difficult task, and you need patient capital. You need capital that is not driven exclusively by short-term returns on investments, and it needs planning of one kind or another to make sure that they're done effectively. And the private sector doesn't deliver on those fronts. So public development banks are a critical tool, and unfortunately and that's true, and very importantly, I think, and so we support a strong increase in the capital base of the World Bank, but we want the World Bank to do that properly, which I don't think it's done so far. We don't want conditionalities attached to that. We want to see more concessional lending, etc. But also, countries have a responsibility with their own development banks to make sure that these are fit for purpose too. And if you look at a country with successful development banks like China, then China has been instrumental in ensuring that we have seen heavy investments in renewables, heavy investments in new climate-friendly sectors, etc. And everyone in the developing world needs to do that. So we, at least from our point of view, we need a different way of thinking about the financing problem from the dominant agenda that we think is pervasive still in Washington and in many capitals, particularly in the advanced world, but also in the developing world too. Just the last point on loss and damage, because loss and damage cannot be financed, it cannot be insured against, it's not an insurance problem. Insurance works with ad hoc shocks, with a lot of information about the nature of shocks. Climate shocks are not ad hoc; they're increasingly systemic, and the information about these shocks is difficult to ascertain. So you can't insure your way to a loss and damage solution, nor is it a humanitarian problem. I mean, we saw that with the floods in Pakistan, where the hope was that the international community, if you hold enough conferences, would come and deliver the billions of dollars that were needed by Pakistan in response. That has not happened. The kind of commitments from the international community from a humanitarian perspective have been unsatisfactory, I think, to put it mildly. So you need a mechanism, a fund, that is properly funded, that can respond quickly and effectively to the kind of shocks that a country like Pakistan received, not only to deal with the immediate emergency consequences, but also to fund the recovery to get the countries to back where they were before the shock hit them. The responsibility for that is, of course, with the advanced economies, because they are the ones that have pumped the most carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We have estimated, our estimates are a little bigger than yours, Sohail. Our estimates are that we would like to see a fund in the order of at least $100 billion, rising to $300 billion. I mean, this is just based on the science of what the estimates are for loss and damage shocks over the coming years. And that all developing countries will have access to that fund. It's not something that's unique to island economies or the most vulnerable economies. It would be accessible to all developing countries. My worry is that developed countries do not want to go down that road, and that the discussions that we've listened to in the Transitional Committee make us very worried that the advanced economies simply do not understand the scale of the problem that many developing countries are facing. And there's a very real danger, and the Transitional Committee, the last of the Transitional Committee meetings is taking place now in Aswan in Egypt. We will see what comes out of that discussion. But it is an issue, I'm sorry to say, that could make or break the COP in the UAE. Developing countries, and I think Pakistan too, are committed to a proper outcome. Developing countries won't ever get what they want, but they can get what they need. There's got to be something on the table that suggests that the international community is understanding of the nature of this problem. And if we get some sort of minuscule fund which is confined to the most vulnerable countries, I think that will make for a very, very difficult negotiating process in Dubai in December. And we are quite worried, I have to say, about the direction in which the negotiations have gone so far. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Richard has thrown very thought-provoking and critical ideas for all of us, and we would get back to those ideas again and again in our panel discussion. And going towards Nadeem, Richard has used this expression that we need to do things differently. Now, you and I, we come from a background of government, and we were members of, I was member of governance, and he was chief economist in planning commission, and he has been chief economist twice. Can we do our planning of the financing of climate action differently, or what has been your personal experience on this account and your take on the study also? Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sohail, for having me here. And I think it's very insightful, which Richard has pointed out. And going back in 2022, when we had these floods and the kind of problems we had in Pakistan, then later on we had this pledge conference in Geneva, $10.56 billion dollars worth of pledges we got over there in response to that 4RF strategy which Pakistan has laid out. And interestingly, when we were finalizing this 4RF framework at the Planning Commission, there was a lot of problems with the supporting agencies at that time, because they were of the view that only we are going to cover the primary damages which has happened in the country, and we are not going to add this additional chapter, which I was very much focused on, and I convinced the minister, and the whole government was almost inclined to have that chapter on long-term resilience. Because our view at the Planning Commission was that if, for God forbid, the same episode happens in down the road 2 to 3 years again, so then what's going to be the recourse? So until we are going have this long-term resilience built in our infrastructure, particularly railways, highways, is less likely that we can ensure, because the extent of rains was 300 to 360%, depending upon the area in Sindh and Balochistan. So these kind of catastrophes are very much there to happen, and nobody can predict them, despite having the best early warning systems in place. So the challenge is, first of all, that how to have this adaptation measures in place and mitigation measures in place. And just to give you the extent of financing that is needed at the global scale, I was just having some basic research, and that shows that McKinsey Institute has pointed out that if we have to keep the 2 degrees centigrade temperature level down as compared to what we have today in 2050, so then it requires almost to reduce the carbon footprint by 1,000 gigatons. That requires 40 gigatons annual reduction, which means that there is a need for $9.4 trillion worth of investments annually. And that is, roughly 3.5 trillion dollars more investments are required. So from where these investments will channel, that's the big question. And why they will channel? It's not, the capitalist world, and mostly, the kind of market systems we are following, it's very rapacious. So nobody is going to, invest because it is for the climate. Nobody is going to do it just because that we want to secure our future, because it's the hyperbolic discounting involves in these kind of decisions, particularly over where a lot of behavioral changes are required among the policy level, and as well as at the citizens level in their behaviors. So it's quite obvious that you need investments on 2 fronts. The first is to create the new technologies which are going to help us secure the future when it comes to the climate disasters in the near future. And the second one is that once the technology is there, then you need just diffusion. It's adaptation at the mass scale among the masses. And then of course, then again, you need to have, good financing mechanisms in the country, across the regions and at the global level. Only then it would be possible that the new technologies which are being created are also going to be adopted. So then again, here lies, I think I feel like, there is again a challenge. There are few technologies which are self-propelling. Like for example, solar, the way, this off-grid solution, then being this net metering arrangements. These are very innovative and smart solutions through which now, even the Pakistan, roughly, we are expecting that by the end of this year, it would be around more than 1,000 megawatts of electricity that is being produced by the households on their rooftops by just placing the solar panels on their rooftops. So, but for this, government came with a regulation. They created this net metering arrangement. Of course, that happened elsewhere before, but it was a serious challenge for a country like us, the developing country, to have this arrangement in place. But once you did this, there are now a lot of financing available in the country. Now, once again, then as Richard said, that the World Bank is financing these solar panels for the farmers to have the solar tube wells. So, but again, when these investments are happening, so these have certain implicit costs, which the countries like us should be aware of. And that is like, for example, now unchecked abstraction of water is going to have serious implications down the road. And I think government of Punjab and KP, they are going up, with having this metered tube wells and stuff like that. But in Sindh and other provinces, there is no, you could say that understanding of this phenomena. And eventually this is going to have serious implications then down the road, 15, 20 years, when the groundwater table is going to seriously get, affected. So similarly, the objective is to highlight, it's not like this, every new technology, and if its financing is available, it's going to resolve our climate challenge. Sometimes it is going to create new challenges. And if the regulations are not properly going to, envisage the future of that technology which is being massively adopted now, is less likely that we are going to get rid of these problems in the days to come. So then the second challenge lies, when the mega investments are involved. Like, we want to have the Amir Basha Dam. We want to have, any other dam, for example, in Pakistan. So billions of dollars of worth of, investments needs are there. So now the challenge is, how to go about it. As Mr. Richard already highlighted, that the public finance is already constrained, but the private financing is even more constrained. It is a kind of a myth that we can channelize the private. But we can channelize, but you need to have proper regulations, proper arrangements within every country, because it involves or it calls for to recognize the geographic, sector, and industry-specific landscapes. It's not gonna occur or happen in a blanket kind of strategy approach that's going to be applied. So now, if you want to finance as a government these mega projects, so then I think public-private investments, public-private partnerships are the only way to go about it. But again, the problem is the countries like us, over where the line ministries and the government departments are very much inclined and addicted to public sector development program or annual development programs of the provincial governments. They don't want to, bother themselves to design those projects in a much efficient and eloquent way, so that those could be pitched to the international investors, to the local, private equity investors, and they can then come up with those funds available for these projects. Is not going to happen. So what's happening is that the governments think that private-public partnerships is a way to deal with your sequestrated or constrained fiscal space. But it's not like this. The public-private partnerships are basically to have better risk management. And with this important aspect is being ignored across the governments, not only here in Pakistan, even all the developing countries. I mean, only few examples, good examples are there, but they did it in a very concerted way. They got, I mean, they had a lot of trainings of the government officials. They prepared them mentally. Then they also, I mean, opened a lot of channels for the investors. They gave them red carpet, managed them they managed their expectations in a much better way. Only then it had happened that they were able to unlock this capital for the climate action agenda over there. So, I mean, with these thoughts, I leave it here, but eventually there will be questions. So
Thank you very much for a very forthright approach, highlighting the issues that the situations, difficult, impossible situations. Richard has strongly advocated the role of public financial institutions. We have a poor record on that, and then our public finances are so stretched. But somehow there is an impression that the provincial governments have abundant resources, if I can use the word abundant. And yesterday, Dr. Amanullah shared with us the kind of ambitious plans that the government of Punjab has in terms of climate action. Hopefully, they would have planned the funding also and planned it with those considerations that Dr. Nadeem has highlighted, and also addressing the expenditure side, because the general impression is that the effectiveness of public expenditure in Pakistan, unfortunately, is going down. What we could do with 1 billion rupees in 2020, now we are not able to do that, discounting all other factors, even in 4 billion rupees, let's say. So, Dr. Manullah, what is happening in terms of expenditure, efficiency management, and you are reorganizing your, as you shared with us yesterday, reorganizing your provincial finances towards the goals of sustainability. So what should we expect good news coming from Punjab in your candid view? Punjab, which is larger than, I think, how many countries and resources that you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to appreciate the study. Is there echo or something? It's okay. Okay. Excellent study, shared by Dr. Safdar on loss and damage fund. I have thoroughly, read that study, and I think it would be better if you may share this study with all the ministries and provincial governments, because you have highlighted very important challenges, and you have provided very good recommendation in this particular study. And I'll be focusing on, as you mentioned earlier, domestic issues in availing climate financing. And then I'll later on come to your question. Green development is costly. Everyone knows it is costly. For example, we have our Provincial Development Working Party meeting. It was going on, and there was a project came for Lahore High Court building to be built in Multan. And we suggested that why don't we go for, green building through our annual development financing. And the chairman at the time, our late Sumbul Saab, he mentioned that since we need a lot of resources for, developing a green building, then how, and everyone knows, we have limited resources. You are saying we have abundant resources, but I don't think we are totally relying on NFC award, which is provided by the, our federal government. And we have our own source revenue, which is very, very limited, and we have a lot of potential to, tap the resources from our own sources. But it's a long way, and I think we need to put more effort. Our provincial revenue collection agencies, they need to put more effort. And as I mentioned, last year our development budget was 700 billion rupees, and we had 403,000 schemes out with thin funding and competing resource allocation per annum to meet the targets by 2030. This is for the Punjab government, not for the federal government. And then, as you highlighted in your paper, that we need to have climate finance unit in Ministry of Climate Change. They have already climate finance unit, but these ministries are, sorry to say, these are climate change ministry and the environment departments in provincial government. They are kind of toothless ministries as compared to finance and planning and development, C&W, which are extracting a lot of financing. For example, we are still giving 200 billion rupees out of our total development budget to the road sector last year. So these are kind of issues we have been facing. Last year we applied for Green Climate Fund. We are trying to get the accreditation for Planning and Development Board, and it took almost 1 year to fill the form, complete the formalities, etc., etc. So I think it would be better if we have climate finance units in key ministries like finance, planning, climate change. We already have. Then like economic affairs, we need deep understanding of climate financing, because right now we have serious capacity issue. I was discussing with our CEO urban unit, and he agreed with us like we need capacity building to apply at least for climate financing. So these are the issues we are facing. What we call like innovative financing in our part, like if we could talk about national government or the subnational government, our innovative our financing, are what we know, like these are development programs, PSTP or ADB at the provincial level. Then we have development partners like World Bank, ADB, AIAB, etc., etc. And the third one is public-private partnership. We are contributing around 60% to the GDP. Punjab is contributing. We are huge. Population-wise, we are at number 11, 12. Area-wise, we are 85 if we compare with other southern countries. And GDP-wise, we are at number 55. Punjab is huge, like subnational government. So obviously, what I was saying, like we have still limited resources, and we need some kind of capacity building for understand these climate finance issues. And lastly, we have recently formulated innovative financing strategy. Here we have discussed about various kind of financing opportunities which we can avail, and these are already mentioned in your loss and damage fund study. Lastly, I'll be highlighting a few, what we are doing in bits and pieces. Like if we talk about renewable energy, we have Qaidazam solar power project, and out of 1,000 to 1,100 megawatt, we have been able to functional only 300 megawatts so far in the past 7 years, only 300 megawatts. This is our renewable part. And if we talk about afforestation and reforestation, this is another important initiative which was implemented in the previous regime. 10 billion tsunami project. It was an excellent project. Then we have energy efficiency programs. At the federal level, we have National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Agency. Similarly, we have provincial Punjab Efficiency and Conservation Agency at the provincial level, which is not even an authority right now. We are the agency is working in a project mode, in a PC1 mode. Then if we talk about climate resilient agriculture, we have only one project, which is SMART project with the support of World Bank. We have been, implementing for the past many years, and we have not been very successful so far. And then if we talk, I told you about the public buildings, that we have been facing major issues in terms of financing, and we have right now limited finances, because we are totally relying on National Finance Commission award, and own source revenue we are contributing very less amount, very, very, very less amount as compared to our potential. Then access to International Climate Fund, this is the need of the hour. And this is what we need to do right now. We need to, we don't like the word capacity building. I mean, if we can Google it, if we can, download the documents, we can do it by our own self. But these are a bit tricky because they have very stringent requirement. If you want to apply for the climate financing, they ask you a lot of questions. And really, it takes sufficient time, significant time to complete their basic performers and forms. So I wanted to be candid and honest at this forum.
That's excellent.
And you have done an excellent study. I think it would be better if you prepare a policy paper, a short paper, so that our civil service officers, they can find time and read 2 to 4 pages in their spare time.
Excellent. That is the purpose of this session also. This is a draft study, so after integrating your critical points and additions, we would finalize that. But thank you very much, Dr. Manlu, for being very candid. But, to be innovative without reforming your current practices, now that is, I think, a very serious issue. And you have honestly told us that how the traditional way of spending, allocating to C&W is always there. And highlighting again, I thank you for that, the need for domestic resource mobilization. Our provinces have not really done much, I would say. It's better than before, but so much more could be done. Because if you can mobilize your own resources from within your own system, your dependency on NFC would reduce. But I would say that dependency on NFC is not really dependency in that sense. It is written on the Constitution, you would always have that. I mean, it's not an uncertain resource, and the fact remains that 58% plus would have to go to the provinces. So you would always have a big resource available. How do you efficiently manage that would be, again, the issue. And on 2 issues, we would come to those issues again and again. Punjab is also going that route of public-private partnership and depending on the private finance. And you also now, all the provinces now want to access the foreign aid much more directly. And though this agenda is not yet on the table, but once we would have access to loss and damage fund, how would it be distributed within Pakistan at different tiers? So, Mr. Yassar, these anxieties about private finance coming into the equation in a big way, how do you explain or even justify, if that's a heavy word, because as Dr. Nadeem has also said, that our own record with regulating private sector in a way is not very inspiring, which though is not an argument for not adopting or experimenting with new initiatives. But if the ground reality is that with $1 of public funding, as Richard has said, the private sector is 67 cents. So still, should we go big on that road? Over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. I reciprocate the impression regarding the study that has already been provided. When I first read NDC, the commitment that Pakistan has to the global community regarding how much we are going to mitigate and adapt, I saw the number that Pakistan is going to have 30% renewable energy as part of its portfolio. Even at that time, Pakistan was producing more than 30% via renewable energy. So my initial comment is that as a developing country, I believe there are certain things that we need to do, and I'll touch on those in my points as well. But we need to take stock of what we are already doing in this regard. Solar panels, solarization. So the number for last year, sir, is 2.4 gigawatt solar panel were imported by private equity in Pakistan. So it is a resource that people from their own kitty mobilized for solarization of their households, their industry, 2.4. And to monetize it, it would be no less than $1 billion worth of solar equipment import by Pakistan. As part of NDC, Pakistan says that we require 101 billion for decarbonization of industries, for renewable energy, this and that. And out of 101, 30% we are going to mobilize from our own resources. For 70%, we'll be needing international community's help. So if we'll just account the investment that Pakistan is already making, I believe that turns out to be $3 billion a year, which very much aligns with our commitment to the global community. So my first point is that I don't know, we have this habit of self-bashing all the time. So we need to, put some accounting what we are doing. Although a lot needs to be done, a lot needs to be done in a better fashion, of course, but there is a lot that is done in the right direction as well, which is not projected in that manner per se. Currently I am working on a project which aims to mobilize finance for clean energy projects. So this international climate finance topic is quite a lot of interest to us, as well as for the private sector projects who want to access this climate finance. So we have been trying to see what this international climate finance is actually. So the overall impression of this finance is that there are certain grant opportunities lying somewhere in the world, and there are a huge provision of concessional financing lying somewhere around the globe, and we need to go there, we need to prepare for that, and we need to pitch ourselves to the requirement of those institutions, and then we will have this access to finance. But recently, some work has been done to dissect what this international climate finance actually is. You have, sir, rightly pointed out that we require, some people say $9 trillion a year, some study says $6 trillion a year. But the amount of financing that is currently being mobilized is $630 to $640 billion a year is the number that is agreed upon, that is being earmarked as this climate finance. So out of this, only 65 billion is concessional finance, and only $20 billion is grant money. All rest of the financing is commercial finance, asking for market-based return. So there are, as you have rightly pointed, so there are no investors in the world who are having their money tied up for this climate finance objective, and you go there and pitch your ambitions regarding climate, and they are going to pour the money into your finance. So as it stands today, Pakistan needs to develop the projects that can ensure market returns. In this regard, I believe there are certain opportunities, at least within the mitigation area, Pakistan very much have. Renewable energy is the one, circularity is another area in which water resource management is another area, agriculture is another area in which we have done, you can say, macro level analysis, but not the micro or enterprise level work that has been done in Pakistan, all right, where if we want to actually mobilize this amount which is market indexed, how we intend to do that. My second point is, somewhat does not align with what you have commented. I still foresee the need of blended finance for that purpose. There would be a lot of opportunities which will not be having this market-based return. So globally, what has been done is that the finance has been used to somewhat structure in a manner that overall, when you structure the deal, it overcomes the market hurdle rate and become financially viable. So we need input from international climate finance vis-a-vis patient capital, capital that is requiring less than what is required by the market, and we use this international finance for that purpose. State Bank of Pakistan deployed a huge amount for renewable energy financing scheme in Pakistan. But all that money was essentially used to provide 80% of the loan amount that is required for those projects. It was not structured in a way that it can mobilize, it can be 20% part of it and 80% can be mobilized from the private sector. So we need a lot more instruments for markets like Pakistan for credit enhancement as well as risk abatement, which are not there in Pakistan. We only have one or two guarantee schemes that are available for Pakistan. One is local and one is international, but no instrument whatsoever is available for credit enhancement. So, we can talk about the details of that as well. Then, we need to see how we can leverage whatever we are already spending in this regard. So, when this, so Pakistan has this target regarding 30% of EVs on the road as per the NDCs. So what does that mean? So when you look at the policy, that means is that we will have 100,000 EV four-wheelers, 500,000 EV two-wheelers and three-wheelers, 1,000 buses and 1,000 trucks on the road running on electricity. What is the investment cost of all this stock? So in the current dollar rate, we require 4.5 billion US dollar to have all this stock on the road. Pakistanis, we as a nation burned $3.2 billion worth of petrol in our motorbikes alone. So we need to see, can we leverage something, what we are already doing, to mobilize finance for what we intend to do? I agree with your point. A lot of work needs to be done by the development agencies. World Bank need not to survey or shed the responsibilities that they own. But we should introspect ourselves as well. So where the opportunities lies for us as a nation, where we are already spending money, whether we can channel that in a manner to mobilize money where we want to be. And to summarize the way I foresee it, that first thing Pakistan needs to do is that Pakistan needs to build A-class organizations in the private sector. We have a few, but we don't have enough. When I talk about these organizations, I'm talking about the corporate governance culture that we need to inculcate in our organization, in which the commercial investor globally is willing to invest. A second point is going to be, it's everybody knows, but how we intend to do that is this improved legal and institutional framework. So so there should be a continuity in policies. Just to give you an example, Sri Lanka just got a bailout. It was bankrupt. Service Industries has a plant over there for manufacturing shoes. They were able to repatriate their dividends from Sri Lanka, even when foreign currency, hard foreign currency, they were able to repatriate even when their economy was under. So that was a sort of strength of the legal arrangement that they had. And finally, as I have pointed out already, that we should not see these global financial, climate financial opportunities to provide us grant, to provide us equity. We should see them as a leverage to mobilize as much as we can from our domestic resources.
Thank you very much, and let us welcome my friend and senior colleague, Mr. Mohsin Chandna. Thank you very much. I have told them already that today is your big day of T-bill auctioning, which is coming into discussion in a big way, indirectly also, that our public financial management system, how sustainable it is and what kind of pressures it is under. But we would come to you after we finish this small loop which we are having right now of the benefits and costs of private finance. Because here the general feeling, Richard commented in very clear terms that private finance has big risks. Dr. Nadeem pointed out to the weaknesses of the regulatory regime, which is another ground reality which we should know. And the general impression is in Pakistan, which is an impression. I'm not kind of bashing that. You see, Yassar has used the word that private sector is bashed. That's not the case, but well, many people think that the behavior of our private sector is such that they tend to monopolize the benefits and socialize the risks or losses, and that is what our experience has been over the past many decades. So, Mughal Sahib, in this context, the exposure of our private sector to international credit markets has been rather limited, which at times we think was a good thing. For example, the 2008 financial crisis did not hit us much because our private sector was not integrated, so to speak. Now, what should be the best terms of engagement with the global private commercial credit market, and knowing fully well that these would be dollar-denominated returns? So, coming from the private sector, how do you help us make a sense from your perspective? Thank you.
I'll try to, in fact, build on the argument that has already been presented, and there are different dimensions to it. But let's understand what is the current capital market globally, especially dollar-denominated. The dollar-denominated market has seen a higher returns even offered by the US Treasury. So that makes that the large dollar soaping machine is back in the market. They are ready to soap fund out of the whole world. And this is a huge economy with a huge demands. So that extra money which was available at 0.25% or 0.5% for foreseeable 2 decades is no longer available. That is followed suit. And look at also the investment behavior of the world, where the investment was going. And if you match these two things with the returns, as a private investor, if I want to invest in even developing countries or even in borderline countries, I mean, whatever terminology you use, investor always pants down the risk. Now somebody else, without any risk, is offering on their dollars at least bare minimum 4% and plus. And if you look at the larger US market, that is 4% plus, plus, plus. If you enter their mortgage market, you can easily get 7% on US dollars. Now do that math for Pakistan. With the inflation in the US dollar to US dollars, and being a businessman, I started in 2018 when the dollar and rupee parity was something around 104 rupees. And just now, in 2023, in around 3 or 4 years, our parity is, after such an effort, is around 277, 78 was the close last night. And that has brought down from 314. So my currency is devalued by something. It's a third of the value it was 2 or 3 years ago. And then country risk, political risk, war risk, these are all because I used to work with the US Treasury when we put together the green climate, the green energy guarantee that was offered through the commercial banks, which is still in place, $176 million. And you know what we paid even 4 years ago on the dollar denominated? 4.5% was the risk the US Treasury charged to USAID to secure that funding. That was 4 years ago. It will be in the range of 10 to 10.5% just to secure an insurance on any investment in Pakistan. So that does not mean that we cannot mobilize financing. We cannot do what is required to be done in the international climate financing. International climate financing will remain under pressure just because of their own deeds of the large economies. Reason being, they overspent during COVID-19 just to remain more popular as a government. They have overspent all their cash, which is resulting in slow growth and inflation in their own economies. So they have to clean up that mess in next 1 decade or so. So there is no extra money. There is no extra cash available. They are in fact taking cash from the market, from the rest of the world, what we are talking about. So when Richard is highlighting that they are not interested, they are completely interested and they understand. They are not idiots. They have built these economies. They have built these institutions which have been controlling the whole world for 100 years or so. They are not idiots. Let's not undermine. They don't want to do it, or they don't have a capacity at the moment or the resources. So World Bank is underfunded, IMF is underfunded, United Nations in general is underfunded, right? So you just name an international institution or multilateral institution, all of them are underfunded. Had they been flushed with money, or even given a resources, international contributors have given a resources equal to what is their demand, I would say, okay, funding is available. There is a structural issue with their approach and their way of mechanism of dispersing it. But there is an inherent issue with the overall resource pool available internationally. And we are asking, and the money always flows in the direction of the FDI flow. So top of it will remain United States. So United States doesn't need a development fund to do a climate change. What they did, every single damn dispensation from the private sector in banking, it has to be done and has to fill the checkbox of the climate financing. Central Bank just introduced it, sir, this year. They only required reporting on that from March 2023. We're just 6 months old on that. There is an international best practice. If you are investing in a factory, there is no harm doing a checklist. And I am really amazed about the Punjab government thinking about we cannot build a green building just because it needs an additional resources. Hello, come on. This is our government doesn't know that is only a 5% incremental cost. Just bring Green Building Council on the table. So Punjab government is saying we cannot build a good green compliant building for the government by 5% incremental cost. Yes, this is a capacity issue, sir. And people are sitting right here in their own province who are guiding the entire nation under your nose. This is a huge institutional issue. So what is the layer? What I'm saying in accessing international climate finance, Dr. Sahab has also mentioned it one way or the other way, but he has highlighted those in his studies, but he has articulated it differently. But I am showing you a picture how these actions are linking you to the excess of financing. HBL, the largest commercial bank, has a pool of fund available. I went down there as a development partner, asked that. They committed $40 million to the clean energy and the green energy projects right away. Within less than 2 months, they disbursed $30 million with an additionality of $30 million because they are an international bank now with a wide enough range. And they can shop good environmental funds here, environmental projects here, and show a compliance elsewhere, especially in Europe and others. We haven't really talked about the carbon and voluntary carbon credit market. Look at that. McKinsey says the total size of the market by 2027 will be a trillion US dollars. I also looked at who received the carbon credits. I thought that the Chinese government said the super idiots, they have come with a heavy-handed environmental compliance for all their industry. They shut down. They reallocated that you will only produce this much if you don't reduce your carbon emission. I went down there in June, saw it, came back, read the McKinsey. It made absolute sense. I realized the 60% of all carbon credits money went to China. Appealed another layer. So whatever number you say, if it is $1 trillion, it means 600 billion went there without selling a needle, just by compliance. They mobilized their international climate fund. So you are asking about the innovative financing. Gear up your environmental departments. Where is the aggregation? CMD didn't work because our federal government is sleeping. But there are 7 international voluntary carbon credit markets functioning. This is also an international fund available out there. This will be concessional because it will be sale and purchase. Who's sold the second highest carbon credits in the market? India. Who sold the third highest carbon credits in the market? Brazil. What are we talking about? We are looking at international financial pool and resources in a very myopic way. We want international development finance to give us either grants, some concessional funds, and a whole bucket of conditionalities. We're ready to go out and buy all of them, right? But Ammar and I am telling you, the whole world has evolved. You cannot have a finance in any developing country from any private commercial bank or the development bank or the project financing unless you take a checkbox of environmental compliance. Who is stopping you from doing it? What does it cost you? None. You can also have a structure of a set-off. If I have a solar, I can get some concession on doing A thing or a B thing. That's called innovation, thinking differently. I myself has been a banker. Bankers are not stupid. They are there to make money for a reason. And if a banking sector is not functioning properly, then economy will not work function. The bankers, on the other hand, does not have any idea what the climate finance is. Whenever I go and ask them, what is a climate finance? They say solar panels. I said, okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mughal. Now, I can see where is it coming from. And Mr. Yassar said that we need A-class institutions, and My guarded response would be that A-class institutions are made by A-class people, with some evolution on the way. And we have our friend and a very competent, capable officer, Mr. Mohsin Chandna, who has worked as our economic minister to Washington also. Mr. Chandna, this whole assertion, that we have not been able to manage our debts in the past, and but we are hooked to debt-creating instruments, and we perhaps are not even now planning our debt management in the coming years, and the provincial governments are also going that route, rather, I would not say heedlessly, but and there has been a strong anxiety expressed here on the role of private finance in terms of climate action, and there is this implicit understanding that the public financial system, the public banks, Richard has suggested that they should play a bigger role when it comes to climate action finance. So I'll request you to start with the macro level. Where are we right now, and can we kick away our bad habits, or are we? And in our study also, we have spent a lot of time on the space on the governance issues, our past habits, and our expenditure inefficiencies. So where are we and where are we going? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Safdar. First of all, I'll talk about debt. Debt is the result of accumulation of past fiscal deficits. So if you continue to accumulate higher fiscal deficits, by the way, we have the highest in the region. So if I see comparison from 2005 till today, we compare with Bangladesh and India, except for 2008, 2009 global financial crisis, their fiscal deficits have not gone up more than 4%. We are hovering around 6% throughout the period. The best period we have was 2016, when it was 4.5%. Okay, but 5 years prior to that, and 5 years or 6 years since then, it has been 6 plus percentage. So if you keep incurring such high fiscal deficits, your debt will balloon. Now the problem during last year and a half has been that globally the interest rates have gone up. I was teaching the course of contemporary issues in global economics in January 2022. And I told my students that I am more excited than you are, because what we will see in the next 4 months, during that semester, we saw US tapering, we saw the end of tapering, start of higher interest rates, and balance sheet normalization. Okay, so if you see the yields for the last, the US Treasury yield on 5-year bond, 2-year bond, 10-year bond, 30-year bond, even 30-year bond is at 4.5%. This is amazing. This is like, when you see compare with the last year, you see everything has gone up over 1%. So the interest rates which went up in Pakistan, first of all, it was because of flood. If you recall, 2010-11, we had super floods, and the inflation went up to 25%. And then too, we had interest rates of 15%. So this time, that time we were lucky that the global interest rates were sub-zero. The quantitative easing was going on. This time, the international interest rates were increasing, and we had flood and we had food inflation. So the interest rates had to go up, and they did. But what I see now is that they are subsiding. I mean, why I was late was because we have an auction today of 1.6 trillion, and the feel I got, I spoke to 5 or 6 major treasurers as always, and I was looking at the secondary market yields, and the yields are considerably down from the last 3 auctions. So I see things are subsiding. The market is expecting decline in interest rates. Maybe on the 30th of October monetary policy meeting, otherwise on the 13th or 14th of December, which is, I'm sure, if this thing can maintain, so the interest rates will be going down, we will be having some fiscal space, and then we'll be in a better position. Now I come to the second thing, where you talk about the private finance. So what has happened is, we should not think that if the size of GDP has gone up because of inflation, because of nominal values, then the market capacity also will increase, so that we will be able to maintain the same debt to GDP ratio. It doesn't happen like that. State Bank has been very effective in injecting liquidity in the market, and I do not see any reason to panic. No worries. Market is also very comfortable. So this is what I'm saying.
Good. Now we go to the audience for a quick round of questions before we get back to the panel. Yeah, please go ahead. ये mic दे दीजिएगा सामने. Dr. Talat, आप नजदीक हैं, आप माइक के बगैर सवाल कर लें, then we go to them.
Thank you very much.
It's working, it's okay.
Thank you very much. I'm Talat Anwar, Professor, State Bank Memorial Chair, Bahauddin Zakaria University, Multan. And I think most of our problems are mainly because of the current, energy mix or the electricity generation mix. And that is not conducive to green industrialization, and that is a constraint, binding constraint for climate finance as well. So because, our energy, mix is tilted towards the, thermal power generation. The share of thermal power generation has gone up less than 50% to about 67% now, and which is very high. And it has gone up under the, I think, the reform program of the World Bank. We had followed World Bank reform program since 1994. So earlier our energy mix was very good, which was quite conducive to the green industrialization and the climate. So as a result of this, and this energy mix is also relies mainly on, imported fuels, fuel oil, and the coal, imported coal, as well as, imported gas. So as a result, we have a number of, crises, including the balance of payment crisis. We have a high trade deficit of about 10% of GDP, and the balance and high current account deficit. We have faced number of crises. Currently, we are facing, debt crisis. So all crises, I think the root of the crisis is mainly because of the current energy mix, which is not good. So I think if we correct our, current energy mix, and if we rely more on the renewable energy, then we can get rid of all problem.
Thank you very much. I would appreciate if the comments are short, and there are more questions than comments, and pointed to the exact. Umar को दे दें, इधर ले माइक सामने, उमर की तरफ.
You on it? Okay. It's a very short comment. Sometimes honesty is not the best policy. So Dr. Amanullah sort of opened up about the government of Punjab, and we sort of let down our flank, and we got a barrage. Coming to climate finance or climate and development at the provincial level, subscribing to what he says, that we do not have sufficient resources to engage in that, and there's the NFC, and our domestic resource mobilization is weak, but NFC is something guaranteed. Having said that, I'm not even going over there. I'm not even going over there. What I would really suggest is that we've never done, and his description was very apt, it's bits and pieces. I think you can generally describe the entire situation about climate change and how we are trying to tackle it as bits and pieces. This is what we are doing. This is the summary description of this thing, bits and pieces. And when you have bits and pieces, it's good to step back. And I think what the Punjab government really needs to do is, before asking for more funds, we really need to do, I don't want to sound like the World Bank, but I'll sound like the World Bank. We really need to do an expenditure review of what are we doing as far as climate is concerned and environment is concerned at the provincial level. Because if you look at the line items and where the expenditures are going and try to align it with whether it has an adaptation effect or a mitigation effect, you will see it is not. And one of the reasons is not, I would sort of disagree, it is not a capacity issue. It's not that we are mentally challenged that we cannot even understand what this, climate finance is. It's sometimes when you are structured in such a way and when you are not organized about it, even for the best brains, the thing look very complicated. So let me give you this example of the Green Building. I was in that particular meeting of the Green Building. The Green Building was agenda number 10, and the remaining 9 agendas were different sectors. The Green Building comes and you have to, reach a decision, and perhaps the C&W people or the communication and works people who are used to, designing the ordinary buildings feel that there is a cost escalation. So obviously any chairperson of the P&D would say, okay, we would defer it or we would go for a review. This is expensive. That does not mean that we are not open to engaging anybody outside the government. But that's the whole idea, that we do not have a game plan for this. We are not even aware that there is a Green Building Council and how to engage a Green Building Council. And perhaps, it would be a great idea at the PWP level that, the climate sector should have one day dedicated only to the climate schemes. And we tried to do when Ali Sarfraz was the chairperson P&D, but later on we realized that we would have to wait for quite some days before they have sufficient number of schemes to be actually considered. So the idea is really, we are in a bits and pieces situation. And when you are in a bits and pieces situation, you have to sort of aggregate these things and see what we are doing wrong and what we are doing right. It's not an issue of capacity at the moment. It would be premature to, prejudge everything in this country as a capacity issue. I don't think so it is one. Thank you.
Umar, Abid, now this theme of thinking in bits and pieces as a problem of structure, this I'll get back to the panelist at the end, that is this really our problem and how to get out of it. Ji Abid, and then Dr. Alia Rai Nasser, and then the lady there.
Thank you everyone for a stimulating talk. It seems that we're in a classic catch-22. From the very beginning, we said that the private sector probably is not ideal to finance this kind of investment. But then the public sector appears, if I take your word, bits and pieces, or more general Mughal Saab's word, incapable of handling a situation like this. So where do we go from here?
That also to the panel. Ji, Dr. Chale, Rai Nasser, kar lein, phir aapke paas aa jate. Mic nazdeek hai.
Thank you, Ji. Rai Nasser, Joint Chief Economist, Planning Commission of Pakistan. My question is addressed to Mughal Saab. To be honest, he made very good presentation yesterday, today as well. I would like to mention as well other presenter as well, Dr. Nadeem, Shwet, Aman and others. My question is, look, you're right, you pointed out rightly, but in public sector, be that province, federal, development is
Okay, thank you very much. I think this aspect, thank you very much, Raisa, for bringing it out. Major expenditure decisions are political. So what would happen to climate financing in terms of political decision? Ji, Dr. Saab. ये माइक यहाँ दीजिए, यहाँ पे आगे बिल्कुल फ्रंट में.
Thank you for giving me a chance to contribute to this very important discourse. First of all, as an academician, I would say that this is a very emerging topic in the academia. I don't think many academic institutions are actually even looking at the topic of climate finance. So this forum should really highlight the issue of a more academic analysis of what actually climate finance is. And I was just looking at some documents which Richard alluded to, the PFM Act, for example. The province of Punjab enacted the PFM Act in 2022, and the rules came out this year. And maybe Aman can throw some light on that. There is a special purpose fund in the rule, which has an operations and investment and a utilization set of policies. Can we look at that? Because you see, the issue is that we have to get the institutional arrangements in order to make use of any climate fund that we are able to access, and to also develop the institutional capacity to see general anymore. It's very specific, but the developing countries need to get more academic guidance, I would say, from, say, the Sharm el-Sheikh implementation plan. It just talks very, very generally about the loss and damage fund. And I was also looking at the COP28 website, and there is supposed to be an issue transforming climate finance, setting the framework for a new deal on finance. Now, what exactly are the contours of that deal? How are developing countries going to prepare themselves to engage in that discussion? So I think this conference is really at a very opportune time when Pakistan is preparing to engage in discussions at the COP28, because we also have to look at how much have we absorbed the terminology, the concepts, and what are we really seeking from the international community. I think this is the most important point that I'm taking home with me today from this discourse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alia. The New Deal as a term has become quite scary for us, that when it's being used internationally or in the European New Deal, and the New Deal of 30s. And let me welcome Mr. Bilal Anwar, the CEO sitting on my right of the National Disaster Relief Management Fund, an extremely important fund which he is heading, which has been recently established. With your permission, let me continue with the questions, and when we come back to the panelists, we would have a bit more time also. GBB.
Hello, sir. Assalamu alaikum. Sir, how can the practice of green industrialization be explained, considering that Pakistan contributes only 1% to global GHG emissions, while more developed and heavily industrialized countries have higher emissions and have all the means to adopt green industrialization on a whole, technologically and financially? If Pakistan were to adopt green industrialization, would it potentially impede its already slow progress? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. I think this aspect in our study came up, this moral argument of getting more funds for us, that we contribute very little, and I think that is very important, and then again, the linkage with green industrialization. But if you push that point too much, people say that you're playing the victim card without addressing your own issues, which we have spoken about. Ji Imran Khalid.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity. We've been having a good discussion. I'm Imran Khalid. I work with WLBF Pakistan, based here in Islamabad. So when we talk about climate change and climate finance, governance is something that is key. So without having a local government system in place in key districts, you cannot bring in climate finance and hope to address the situation within the communities. Because at the end of the day, it is the local governments that will start the process of analyzing climate risks and addressing them. At this time, decisions being made in the federal capital or in provincial capitals do not account for the communities. So when we're talking about climate finance, that is key. Secondly, vis-a-vis climate finance and loss and damage, if I can come to Richard in this regard, how do you account for the governance issues? So for example, last year when the floods in Swat River happened, there was a hotel that was built right within the riverbed and it fell down because of the floods. Now, is that a governance failure or is that a climate failure, right? And so when you're doing this discussion, what should the processes look like in terms of highlighting, yes, XYZ are loss and damage primarily due to climate change, and ABC are primarily due to our governance failures. And there are going to be overlaps and there's going to be a lot of discussion. And unless and until we account for that, we won't be able to reach out to the financial entities and get the necessary funds. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Imran, for bringing in the issue of mobilization of local finances for climate actions. I think that in itself is an extremely important area. Ji Wasif, aa gaya. Dr. Wasif from NED, Karachi.
Assalamualaikum. Sir, basically my question is not a question, basically it's a relevant comment that we basically procure the technologies, we do the finance and then we bring the technologies in Pakistan to make the climate clean. But basically there is no monitoring of that machinery or equipment, and it is quite possible with the digital systems. So there is a need to finance to the digital systems and digital manufacturing and these aspects as well, so that we can monitor that the equipment and the things which we brought in Pakistan, we are they working with the full efficiency or not? Because they become the garbage, and again there is an issue. We have so many solar panels and systems in Pakistan, and they have become the the garbage. They are not working, and even it is an immense need that we need to discard that. So that is my question, that how we can do that.
I think that's an extremely important comment coming from engineering universities, that these fashions force us to spend a lot of money which is eventually wasted. There are so many fancy machines lying all around. So again, this goes back into the expenditure management or expenditure efficiency. And the last question, Sarah, please bring the mic to her.
Sir, can I ask the question?
Okay, Sarah.
Because I have already taken the mic.
Okay, well, that is okay. And she is our guest from Muzaffarabad, so we must listen to her. Please go ahead.
Yes. This is Professor Dr. Samina Sabir from the University of Azad, Jammu and Kashmir, Muzaffarabad. I have a very short question. Basically, Pakistan is going through various problems. For instance, lack of institutions, bad governance, bad macroeconomic conditions, political instability, and many other problems. So in such conditions, when Pakistan do not have sufficient resources, and after 18th Amendment, local government doesn't have any money, so how the climatic finance can be managed to curtail the environmental issues? Thank you.
And that brings up the Muzaffarabad and the regions, AJK is also a very badly hit potentially. ये माइक जरा पीछे ले जाइए, एक मुझे ले लेंगे क्वेश्चन, फिर आपके पास आ जाते हैं. या माइक पीछे, बिल्कुल पीछे डॉक्टर हबीब के पास. डॉक्टर अमजद, आपको क्वेश्चन अपना लंच पे ले जाना पड़ेगा, because we want to give sufficient time to the panelists and then the chair also, and we have to present the recommendations of the two-day conference before the lunch. Ji, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Habib, again. My comment rather is about climate financing. As we know, environment has become a provincial subject after 18th Amendment, and obviously all the international dealings with regards to climate finance that is being done by the federal EPA or federal climate change. So I see there is lack of coordination between the federal and the provincial department. So that must be addressed when it comes to climate financing. Coming to the carbon crediting, which one of the speakers talked about, I completely agree with him on this, that we are lagging far behind in this. Although, I mean, the province of Sindh is leading in this, and they have done a great job with regards to mangroves and forest and all this. But as you know, KP has the largest forest cover, but I'm afraid we are still dragging our feet on this. We haven't been able to, to materialize this carbon crediting. So yes, that's a kind of failure. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. जी माइक आगे ले आइए, बिल्कुल आगे फ्रंट पे. This issue of coordination between federation and the provinces is an extremely important issue, which deserves a lot of attention. Ji, sir.
Thank you. I think for better understanding, I won't indulge into any comments, but would ask two straight questions. One from Mr. Sajjad Mughal, who actually woke us up from our slumber and was very straightforward. The government of Sindh has recently raised about $30 million from the Sindh Mangrove Project in the VCM. Would you like to inform the audience and me about the role of the private sector, Pakistani private sector, in accessing the VCM? My second question is to Mr. Chandna. In the earlier part of this workshop, Dr. Kozul-Wright categorically stated that we will have to look at our own development finance institutions for climate finance. I would like to ask you, what is the appetite of our joint investment companies for supporting climate mitigation, climate adaptation, and others? We have a number of companies, the joint Pak China, Pak Libya, and others. Would you like to throw some light on that, please?
Thank you, Sarah. With this, we have to stop taking the questions. Mr. Bilal, during the conversations, this issue of capacity, particularly institutional capacity, and the need to evolve the whole architecture of public finance management, including the banking, financial intermediaries. Now, where is your fund coming from, and what should be our expectations? Quickly, please share us, and then we go to the rest of the speakers one by one, requesting them to address the questions directed at them, and then I have three questions for every panelist. Please go ahead.
Well, first of all, my deepest apologies for coming late. People who knows me, they know that I normally don't come late, but interestingly, coincidentally, I was actually locked in on a discussion which were very much similar on climate finance in a slightly more captivated fashion in preparation for COP28, and it was not possible for me to leave there. So thank you very much, Dr. Saab. I think I'm sure that insightful discussion must have happened in my absence as well, and seeing some of the questions coming from the floor. I think the one kind of a refreshing thing is these are very pertinent, very timely questions. Slightly late, being asked and being addressed at several levels as well. I think what is lacking is the kind of a culmination and coordination is not happening, and we're not really translating them into the kind of actions which are required, whether it is in the form of carbon financing, which is becoming a very sexy topic these days for carbon credits, or in the generic climate finance space as well. Pakistan has a kind of a bad track record of attracting finance, any kind of concessional finance, unless there is a mega scale disaster like the last year flood, and even in that case as well, the amount of the magnitude of concessional finance was minuscule. So most of the funding which actually flew in at that point in time was also in the form of loans and debts, which of course is not a very ideal situation. Now, NDRMF, it's a federal government fund, and our role and mandate is basically resilience building or contributing to the resilience building in Pakistan, and we invest into the projects and the programs and interventions and the activities which basically contribute into the resilience building and to disaster risk reduction and disaster risk financing and several other mechanisms. We have done some work. I won't claim that a huge amount of success we might have achieved. A number of reasons for that, but let's not get into that discussion. I think I would like to really dive very right into the discussion which I've just kind of collected from the floor, Dr. Shah, with your permission. I think let's get the kind of facts straight as well, at least for our own sake as well. When we look into I start from international finance and come to the domestic or private or whatever the form of financing which is available domestically. When we look at international financing under climate finance or green financing, which is more kind of attuned towards today's topic, I mean, there are two kind of ways of looking at it. One is that quite a significant amount of financing, or the flow of financing has happened. And the synthesis report from UNFCCC Secretariat basically counts the figure something around 630 or $82 million on an annualized or a biannual basis. This is not a small amount, but when we look into it, that how much Pakistan has, or many countries like Pakistan has been able to achieve or to attract that, I think the numbers are quite dismal. And there are a number of factors for that: institutional, structural, capacity issues. We do not have the projects available which actually are able to attract the financing. Everyone talks about the bankability of the projects, and actually in several meetings very recently have been actually going around and challenging quite a number of practitioners in the field that, okay, can we sit down and talk about, what makes a project bankable? Let's break it down into three components, and let's see that if we can put the jigsaw pieces together, and then suddenly it becomes the project bankable. And I haven't been able to get the answer, frankly. If we look into the $100 billion, the financing which is there, so there is one number which is 600 something. There's another number which actually 2021 reached to $83.6 billion. So in a way, that is not too far away from the $100 billion, depending what kind of operational definition of climate finance we want to apply. But if we are very, very restricted, and we say that it's adaptation or mitigation finance, and it's not the OECD definition, which is slightly more liberal, then we come to around $80 to $90 billion, which is not too far away from the $100 billion number. So suddenly when we say that the countries like Pakistan or the developed countries have not been able to live up to their commitments of $100 billion, the argument actually suddenly loses its value, because if we're talking about $90 billion and many of the countries like us are still suffering, then definitely there is something wrong. Now the second part of the question is, maybe the need for the financing is pretty high, it's too much. Again, depend how we crunch the numbers. There is a number, especially in Pakistan, and that's based on the several kind of sources, World Bank study or ECD, and some similarly, there's a study which is going on, and I'm part of it, happen to be part of it. It's a BCG study under FCDO. So the number is something around 2.5 or $2.5 trillion until 2030. So I think what we're talking about is really a very deep-rooted institutional and structural issues, which as a nation, as many of the institutions, we haven't been able to address that. And unless we don't address that, we are not one of those attractive countries out there in the world where the investments or the climate finance is going to flow in. the lady over there, she said that, okay, we are a 1% mitigation, our contribution is 1%, but can anyone in the room, I mean, you know, you all come practitioner, you all are, many of you are engineers, can anyone actually tell me what is the carbon intensity of our industrial processes against the productivity? What is the carbon intensity? I think the number is going to be quite interesting, and you may not want to actually pull out that number at the international forums. And I think that also need to be addressed, but I think the point it drives is there is quite a huge potential for mitigation, and mitigation come in the form of both concessional, but largely non-concessional, but in the investment format, which might be needed, more needed in Pakistan, and that's what I think we need to be focused on it as well. We in NDRMF, actually, we are actually undertaking some of these measures, and we are working with the industry. We are kind of going out and creating the awareness on carbon markets, and similarly a number of other initiatives as well. But these are very small measures, and a number of factors have to come together. I stop here, but I'll be available to provide any further inputs. Thank you.
Yeah, we would have many more sessions with you. Now, coming back to the panel, I know I have to address my first question. I have to go to Mr. Mohsin Chandna, who has to go. Yeah, so not only that, you answered to Sarah and any other question, but I have 3 questions for all the panelists. Where do we go from here? That's number 1. The politics of climate finance, the local, regional, international, national, and this bits and pieces modality of doing things. How do we go about it? So please address the individual questions and then these 3 questions, and so that you are at peace. If you would like to, we would love you to stay, but if you would like to leave, it could be okay. Thank you.
Sarah, I'm sorry, I am not aware of any major project initiated by any DFI on the climate change. Pak Brunei, Pak China, Saudi, Pak Libya, Oman. The second thing is, government of Pakistan has received a few informal proposals from different, at least 2 or 3 organizations on environmental social governance and the green bonds. We are looking at these, but as I said, I don't think anything will materialize until and unless the global exchange interest rates start going down. At this point, I see no hope in the next 6 months. Okay, and about Dr. Safdar Sohail's questions, one question: where do we go from here? I have partially answered this, and I think as far as debt is concerned, we are pretty much safe. There's nothing, though. We had a very nice event on Monday by CFS Society on debt sustainability, and I think the consensus was that things were worrisome in early part of the year, but now things have calmed down. Market is embracing the possibility of a likelihood of interest rates going down, and I think early part of next year we will see better results. Can I beg leave now?
You would not like to comment on. Okay, wonderful. Mohsin, thank you very much for coming. I understand, and it's hugely appreciated.
Today's my auction day.
I know. So now we go to Mr. Mughal.
In fact, I lost track of some of the questions because there were so many of them. But I respond to your. Let me clarify. I did not portray a dismal picture. Correction. What I'm saying is, stop looking outside, start looking inside. You have plenty of resources within the private sector, and let's take all those baby steps. All these baby steps add up to something like a marriage. So, since most of us are married people, so we always take some baby steps which add up to a fuller life. So, environment mitigation and all that stuff will be just like that. So don't be upset about it. We all make mistakes, we learn from them, and we move forward. What I'm saying is, Everybody talked about institutional structures. We have an amazing institutional structure within our banking sector, which in fact sustained the shock of 2008 and then after that, and we remain robust. Even in these testing sites, I mean, nobody questions the credibility of our private sector banks. So we did an amazing job in last 2 decades in building our financial sector, so we must have a faith in that. Second thing, partly answering your question, it is not about what we have done or what we haven't done, because environmental degradation or the climate change, remember, it is climate change. It is still changing, so not predictable. Keep that in your mind. Something has already happened. There is narrative, there is a trend, you can predict. But in a changing climate environment, that's why it is an headache. That's the reason that all countries, developed, underdeveloped, have been affected by that. You want to make it worse, or you want to be one stopping, take a look and say. So I always say it is no longer a choice. So forget about that argument. No more an argument. We will go down the hill, all of them, and won't survive because it has happened. Because environment change doesn't look at the administrative boundaries or the country's boundaries. So let's look at it as a one global community. This is the only way forward. Let's understand that. B, the resource mobilization and institution building is nothing. We just need to look around. What I'm saying collectively, as a government, as a private sector, as an academia, or the think tanks, or the social, the civil society altogether, I mean, this is an amazing work that has been done, which Dr. Safdar has done. We are all brought together. We have all our contributions. We have started that discussions, highlighted a few weak points and the hot spots, and we need to put them together. Going forward, sir, I see 3 or 4 things happening now for Pakistan. A, the private sector investment in certain areas will come and flow through our own and local resources because of external pressures of compliance, because there is a money to be made. Our export sector will do it, and their vendor industry will do within the industry. And the energy pricing is going to be a main driver. So solar panel became a fashion or a fad just because we did the right pricing for electricity or the power or energy which was overdue.
That's excellent. You have another point to make?
Just last thing. So never ever lose a hope within this country. This country is large enough to fail. This current country has one of the finest brains, and we can pull it together.
I say that presence of 9-10 people on the stage and 120 people in the hall on the last session of the conference, that's an expression of a strong hope that we can do and we can make a difference, and inshallah we would do that. Very quickly, Mr. Yeah.
So, point 1 would be that we take account of all what is happening in Pakistan vis-a-vis climate finance. In this regard, twice there was a report called Climate Public Expenditure and Institutional Review that accounted for all the federal level expenditures and earmarked them how much of that was going into climate related activities. A unit was established at Ministry of Finance, Climate Finance unit that was supposed to report that. Those numbers need to come out, and that will actually show the commitment of Pakistan. And my hunch is that we are already going beyond the call of duty in this cause. So point 1 is that. Point 2 is that regarding the building of capacity, or what I would say is building the capacity of private sector to fulfill their commitments via improved corporate governance. We need to bring in to the minds of, back, so for the investment community in Karachi, till the success of Kareem, Maiman community was not able to put their money in IT sector. So we need a lot of such examples in which the domestic capital that is available to us can be deployed into the venues in which we want it to go. Like, you mentioned solar panel. Now, if we further dig into that, who is actually importing solar panels? You will be surprised to know that many textile sector firms are actually now into the solar panel import business because it is making sense. Who has installed most of the wind power in Pakistan? Again, you will see it is the local investor who were deploying their funds earlier elsewhere. They were actually the sponsors of our wind power projects. So my second point is going to be look at the domestic, the capability of domestic market to invest into the avenues and try to nudge them into the direction in which we want to see. And finally, regarding the global landscape of climate finance, Bilal sir would be in a best position to comment on that, but my opinion is that if something like JEF can be structured around a loss and damage fund in which a certain amount is already earmarked based on certain criteria rather than you are going into this competitive process again and again and not knowing, like, Sajjad Sahab has mentioned that the biggest polluter on the planet is getting most of the carbon credits in the world. So I don't know if anybody see the contradiction in that, but I certainly do.
Thank you very much. The presence of our panelists here is an expression of their support for developing more robust policies, and most of our panelists are our friends and colleagues also. Syed Haider Shah, I think the ministry back needs you urgently. We would finish in 40 minutes and all. If you can hang on for 40 minutes, we would be very happy. Otherwise, you give your detailed remarks as the chair of the session, and then we would continue. It's up to you. You can wait. Okay, that is excellent. But I'll request the panelists to give their concluding thoughts quickly. Dr. Manullah.
I will not be honest this time. And thank you very much, Ammar, for bailing me out from this situation. And lesson learned. Honesty is not always a good policy, which makes you become a victim of friendly fire on the stage. And secondly, I just wanted to highlight quickly a couple of things, like Dr. Ali has asked about the special purpose vehicle. We have promulgated our Public-Private Partnership Act, Authority Act in 2019, and there is a clause, I'll read it from the document. Project implementation and operation before signing the PPP agreement with the authority, the private party may establish, without changing its shareholding, a special purpose vehicle for implementation and operation of the project, and such SPV shall assume all the rights and obligations of the private party under the PPP agreement. And I'll not be honest with you this time, we are not doing wonders. We are doing wonders in PPP in Punjab. And now you need to understand whether we are doing it or not. And lastly, if we talk about the local government, it was a very good question. We used to have one central government in Islamabad. Now we have 5 central government, and they don't want to give powers to the local government. And until unless we have local government structure, we won't be able to make a significant changes. Look at New York, USA, look at UK. Their mayor are the second powerful person after their presidents or prime ministers. And we have, I'll say again, our mayors of Lahore, they are the most, toothless person who has no power to even do some, जो हम कहते हैं like street pavement etc. वो भी नहीं करवा सकते. So.
Thank you very much. I think being candid is the spirit with positive hope. So I really appreciate, though we government servants have ways to convey in rather circuitous way, but I think today we had this open, frank discussion. Dr. Nadeem, it's over to you.
So I think regarding your first question, I would say that investments will follow the profits and returns, even whether, and that roads which offers high returns, whether it leads to even hell, investors will follow that. It's very, very simple rule. So, following this principle, any company who is seeking to create value by reducing its carbon footprint, at the end needs to be competitive within the industry, within the, its locus or where it's operating. So, having this in mind, it's less likely that by just, to embrace climate agenda, anybody is going to do something if it is not going to make sense when it comes to making money. So that's the bottom line. So now having this context, those things will eventually happen in bits and pieces because there is no uniform, you could say that approach or blanket strategy that could be pursued by having a very holistic and comprehensive kind of framework to deal with these. Because, it depends on the geography. Something which is very viable in South Punjab might not be viable in the North Punjab, might be that's not even going to be viable in your northern province. Which is going to make it like, you will have to do the things in bits and pieces, very specific to the localities, very specific to the rules, regulations which are prevailing in that particular province. So, and when it comes to the second question that you said that the politics of climate finance or climate change, coming back to what Mohal Sahab just said, that is a $1 trillion carbon credit market. I think it's not 1 trillion, might be several billion dollars, not more than that. But even if it is that, no doubt it's the China which is going to take advantage then as India and Brazil. But it's not like this. If you dial down and dilate this whole story, then you would find out that all those businesses in 80s, 90s, they came to China for seeking efficiency gains or seeking its labor advantage, cheap labor advantage. They were owned by the Western people. So these are the businesses who are now divesting or retrenching because that destination is no more viable for them. Either they are sequestrating that. So eventually it is that the West is getting generous with the West. It's not that they are getting generous with China or the developing countries like us. But of course, it doesn't mean that this domain is a kind of not touchable for us. It is touchable, but you need to have a lot of effort. And I think there was a lady, she asked this question, how much our private sector is doing on that front? That's a big question. And again, it's not the question for the private sector, it is the question for the governments, that what we are doing for them. How much space we are creating for them in that domain that they can easily, carve out some of their business processes in a way that not only going to damage them in the domestic market, but then also going to take advantage of these international financial, you could say that pockets which are available for these kind of investments. So
thank you very much. I think this session had this kind of a dialogue between private finance, private sector representatives and state present here. And Dr. Nadeem, thank you very much for showing this other side also. You see, bits and pieces may not be bad for its own sake.
Of course not.
And you need to have holistic approaches, but holistic approaches take time to even develop, to implement. They are usually long-term and they are they are rather theoretical, I would say, or at that macro level. But at macro level, I think the conceptualization of our main issues in terms of our integration with the globalization and global markets, Richard, I'm coming to you. So there, in that context, what would be your advice to base our holistic approach, I'm not using the word in plural, which can help us in the context of all the discussion that we had? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, clearly, given the comments and the questions, sorry. I mean, there's a huge interest in this topic, and I think it probably merits its own a conference in its own right, because it's new to many people. It's new to us too, and we are learning. You mentioned the difficulty often of entering this field. The acronyms are unfamiliar. The agreements and the various articles of agreements are unfamiliar. So there's a lot to learn. I mean, often the language is different. When some of the people talk about economic terms in the UNFCCC, they're not the kind of way I think about economic terms. So, I mean, there is a real challenge, I think, and particularly for developing countries who don't often have the capacities to follow these in the way advanced economies do. That needs to be, there's a gap that needs to be addressed, I think, for sure. On the specifics of the loss and damage, which you asked and someone else asked about that issue, and I mean, actually in that area, developing countries have been very quick to kind of get up to speed on understanding the complexities of this issue, and in fact, the only group that has advanced a meaningful blueprint for a loss and damage fund is the developing countries. The advanced economies have yet actually to present their own profile of a loss and damage fund, and they're just responding to the developing countries. They're very negative about it, but they're responding. So in that area, it's quite impressive the way developing countries have come around. And but there are lots of issues there. There are governance issues, there's funding issues, there's the question of what triggers access to this kind of fund. I mean, that was an issue, I think, that was raised about who's responsible for this. And yet that's going to be something that has to be worked out as this fund takes shape. But if you take an example, for example, the case of Libya, right, the recent floods in Libya, which were clearly caused in part by the intensification of the storm itself, almost certainly due to climate change, which then met the problem of the lack of investment in the dams in that particular region, dams that hadn't been the upkeep of which hadn't happened for a decade or more, that were very vulnerable to any kind of shock. People have been talking about that in the region for years. But nothing was done about it. Now, who's responsible for Libya's mess, right? I mean, that's a pretty complicated question, to put it mildly. So, I mean, these are going to be difficult issues about the kind of trigger mechanisms that are identified in the discussion. But there's serious work going on around these issues. So now that's one issue that came up. I have to disagree with my colleague here to the right. Pakistan is what they call a frontier market. It's a country that has entered international capital markets over the course of the last decade or so, and it's done so. And for private investors in advanced economies, it was attractive because the returns on old emerging market bonds, I mean, the countries that had been in those markets for 25, 30 years, was declining. So there was an opportunity to make a quick return in frontier market bonds, like Pakistan, because you had to charge a higher interest rate to bring in investors that were looking for higher yields. Now that was okay when interest rates after the global financial crisis were at zero or negative because of quantitative easing. But even under those conditions, Pakistan was facing trouble at the end of the last, even before COVID hit, even before the rise of interest rates as Federal Reserve and the ECB tightened. Pakistan was facing debt distress. Now it's in a massive crisis. It's what we call in UNCTAD a development crisis. If your government is spending 50% of its revenues on servicing a debt, which is essentially what is happening now in Pakistan, you have very little resources to do what a government needs to do in terms of development objectives, infrastructure spending, etc. And that's the crisis. And I don't think, as I said, I was in Marrakesh last week. All the talk was interest rates will be higher for longer in the advanced economies because they're committed to hitting their 2% inflation target. We disagree and disapprove of that target a lot in the work that we do in UNCTAD, but all the talk in Marrakesh was that interest rates will be higher for longer. The squeeze on countries like Pakistan is not alone in this respect. Egypt is another country, Kenya, Ghana. These are all countries that face the similar situation. So I don't see any major relief coming down the road towards the end of this year or into next year, unfortunately, for a country like Pakistan. So I would disagree with that interpretation, and I think the need for taking the debt issue much more seriously in the Washington institutions is something we have to address urgently. On the issue of capacity building, which came up from a number of the comments, and the question of capacities when you're dealing with the relationship between public and private finance, I think there are issues of capacity there. There are always issues. But, my example is my own country, right? One of the countries that first ventured into the territory of public-private partnerships was the United Kingdom. The Public Finance Initiative was launched actually under the Tory government, but was augmented by Gordon Brown when Brown was Chancellor of the Exchequer in the 1990s. What is the I don't know if any of you have been to Britain recently. If you look at the state of its water system, if you look at the state of its railroads, if you look at the state of its roads, if you look at the state of its healthcare system, if you look at the state of its basic public utilities, this major initiative has clearly failed to deliver the kind of financing to upgrade public utilities. So it's, and that's not a capacity. There are capacity problems in the UK, I know, but they're not the kind of capacity problems that a country like Pakistan faces. So there's clearly something wrong with the model. I think you need to recognise that the way in which private finance has been re-engineered over the last 3 decades, the highly financialised, a highly speculative kind of financial system is not fit for delivering the kind of patient, long-term, affordable capital that most developing countries need to make the investments that they have to make. Look, I don't know a lot about Pakistan, and this is not just this is not a recent problem. I don't know a lot about Pakistan, but I did look at the investment figures. In fact, capital formation, which is what we need. We need, as I said, investment in real stuff. Capital formation in Pakistan peaked in around 1967 as a share of global GDP. Collapses in the early 70s, recovers, but not to the same level. I think below 20% was the figure that it peaked again at in the 90s. And it's been on a steady downward trend since the 1990s. And now the rate of capital formation, the share of capital formation in GDP is around 15% in Pakistan, has been for the last 5 to 10 years. That is not a level of capital formation that can deliver the kind of industrialization or the climate investments that we need. And, the argument, and here we get into our critique of the World Bank. For most of this period, you've been under the tutelage of the IMF and the World Bank, and they've told you if the government gets out of the way of the private sector will begin to invest on a significant scale. And there's simply no evidence for that. It's an evidence-free argument, because when you look at the kind of trends that you see in Pakistan, that is clearly not the case. And some of it has to do, I agree with you, when investors can make money much more money by investing in assets, in treasuries or whatever abroad, not only because the return is guaranteed, but there is a likelihood that you will make even more money because the dollar is strengthening against your own currency, not just true of Pakistan, true of a lot of developing countries, then it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. People will take their profits and invest them in financial assets. And that's a feature that we see across the developing world and in the advanced economies. I'll leave you with one fact, which makes me nervous about the people who talk about private investment. A healthy capitalist economy makes profits, and the people that make profit invest them in productive equipment, in their people, training, research and development, etc., etc. If you look at the profits of the 500 top countries on the S&P index in the United States, out of every $10 that those companies make, on average, $9 is spent either on paying dividends or buying back shares, including their own shares. That leaves $1 to actually invest in productive stuff in the United States. That is not a model. That is not a model that is going to solve the climate problem in the 21st century.
Thank you very much. And for many, this would also explain the reason that Social Protection Resource Center is a partner of UNCTAD. For us, this is a social policy issue, this mindset, this narrative, this received wisdom. And Richard, thank you very much I would take it as a concluding event also of the whole event, this thought that we need to very seriously, critically revisit our imagination, I would say. So that is very, very important, and we would take it forward. That's why we are together. We hope to create critical knowledge which can help us in the coming years, and we leave the trodden path for new avenues. Very quickly, Dr. Imdad is with us. He would present. Dr. Imdad, where are you? Yeah, please come to present the recommendations or key insights of the conference before we request our chair to deliver his address. Dr. Imdad is the head of the Department of Public Policy and Governance of IT University Lahore, who is our partner for this conference. Thank you, Imdad, for reporting.
जी, अस्सलाम वालेकुम. Excuse me, अस्सलाम वालेकुम. मैं आपकी इजाज़त से, should I be bilingual? Okay.
English, please.
Okay, so I'll stick to English. There are 6 key themes which come out of this conference, and mainly from the discussions and papers which have been presented. The first problem is very important, which we pay very little attention to, and Richard and many other participants today and yesterday discussed about this, and it is turning a bit away from American and Western solutions and look at China. And I think Pakistan needs to work on learning how to learn from China. And when I say learning to learn from China, it is not copying what China actually did to achieve a particular thing, but looking at the conditions which China created in the last 30 or 40 years, in which it achieved certain successes, despite all of its problems. So I think one takeaway and follow-up research agenda which comes for Social Protection Resource Center and us is to find a way to learn what to learn and how to learn from China when it comes to green industrialization. The other problem which have been discussed yesterday and today too is translational problem. Sajjad very clearly and very openly, directly mentioned yesterday that 80% of the people in industry, and when he says 80% of the people in industry don't understand our vocabularies of related to climate change. So if we continue talking to each other using these vocabularies, which are primarily coming from America, these academic and professional vocabularies, maybe after 10 or 15 years, we'll be talking to each other, not to the people in the field who really, really need knowledge on climate change. So the problem, translational problem, is, I think, is really central to addressing climate change issues. And when Sajjad and many others talked about the problem of vocabularies and this knowledge on climate change, which is coming from mainly World Bank and our American friends, he was talking about established industry. But most of our industry, for example, when it comes to detergents and spare parts, for example, or for example, kitchen, and chemical making, there is so much industry which is like one room industry. See, 70% of like these small informal industry in Pakistan, the people are not that educated and they are not familiar with all these technical processes to make or to produce green or in an environment friendly way. So I think the next point which will go with us is to work on how to do this translational work so that our people who are really involved in producing things, how to communicate to them, to work on advancing green agenda in Pakistan. The third problem, which I think have come again and again from discussions and my discussions with some of the participants too, is that we seriously need to work on our national and domestic agenda for green industrialization in Pakistan. An agenda which is really national and which is owned by, if not by all of the industrialists, but at least most of the people who are either working with the industries or who are producing something. And there are two things which I think come again and again from this conference, although the discussion and the themes and the data and information has all been wonderful. There have been really, really important topics, but I think there is some kind of, for example, when we talk about, there are some confusions on, on really about the specificity of our questions. We emphasize research, but we need to be more clear on what should our questions be and how should we address those questions and what kinds of answers we want from our research. Do we want really, really expensive answers? Do we want answers that work in our condition? Do we, do we want to import, all the time import answers or solutions which have been worked out somewhere else for us? So this is third. Number four, which is also I think very important, you can, if you like, take a bird's eye view of today's presentations, is that our research and our work on climate change needs to be inventive. Okay? Maybe some of us know a lot about, we can describe the situation, we have a lot of data, we can run analysis, and this tells about our national situation when it comes to knowledge-related green industrialization or climate change. We are a lot more analytical and descriptive rather than inventive. When then, if we are inventive, we have to leave analysis and description a little bit behind because we are so attached to these old style research methodologies across the fields where we collect data and run analysis. We should read data and and free ourselves from the tyranny of analysis and be more inventive in our own conditions, and I think we'll be taking this forward with us. One thing which is, when I say inventive is very important is yesterday this was discussed, that we need to develop different kinds of indicators which speak to us for ourselves. And we cannot develop, different styles of indicators for us if we are not inventive. Okay? If we remain or choose to remain analytical, we will be following and using the same indicators which don't work for us. Okay, a smaller point is related to women. In small industries and informal industries and production houses, most of the workers are women. And in households, for example, in households, which produce, households actually produce emissions, double the aviation industry, double the aviation industry. But household remains out of the gaze of regulation. In Pakistan and even in America too, in any country, household remains outside the gaze of regulation. So we need to find a way to speak to women who are, who have these repositories of knowledge about climate change, because they are the first one to notice changes in the environment and atmosphere, because they have to rear children and take care of. And it remains true for Pakistan. They do laundry and they do kitchen work. That is very, very, and they deal with the water. And these are the sources of major footprint in Pakistan. And I think, this is also needs to be taken up, women's knowledge related to climate change. We, much before then, any machine which take notice of environmental shifts, our bodies are the first machines which tell us what change has taken place in the environment, in the temperature. So I think this is very, very important. And one last point, but is I think one of the most important points when it comes to say any discussion in Pakistan, or it should actually come to the fore. We are quite wasteful as a nation, as a bureaucracy, or as industrialists in our homes. If I read how much we waste, for example, in terms of water, for example, we're running out of water, but our taps keep running. And we are running out of gas, but only in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, we lose 1 billion cubic feet of gas every day in leakages. And we lose 30 to 40 billion cubic feet of gas only in our kitchens, because our stoves are not fixed. And what is wasted in bureaucratic discussions and during implementation process, and what is wasted, for example, in industries, that is quite a horrific story. So this is the last point. I think we'll be taking this forward, how to be less wasteful. Until we do something about this, maybe, until we do something about becoming less wasteful, I think it's not possible to become green or environment friendly. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Imdad, for beautifully summing up the discussions and linking it with the future. And as was mentioned yesterday also, that this is not an ordinary conference for us. This is the beginning of a journey in which we have all the colleagues coming from all over Pakistan, and we have established a Green Industrialization Development Collective. And I understand that the introduction has been shared with the people. So I'll very briefly for a minute apprise my guests also, because the participants know about it, that what do we plan to do. Do we have the slide on that? It would not take long. So we have established what we call GIDC to help Pakistan re-industrialize to help Pakistan reindustrialize under a unified framework of greening and modernization with the clean and lean manufacturing sector leading the long-term sustainable, the long-term sustainable development of Pakistan. The forum will support innovation and research on adopting clean technologies and processes, circular economy, and supplement technical and institutional capacity building efforts of government. I remember Umar, we do have a lot of capacities, so they are there, we would supplement them. Capacity building efforts of government, universities, and technology providers at macro, micro, and sectoral levels. Next. Now we have listed some of the key benefits and responsibilities. This is the last slide also, which we have shared with everybody. We would develop collective development of a knowledge platform and dissemination, collective advocacy and awareness initiatives by pooling the research and communication resources, research collaboration between network partners in favor of a private positive nexus between the climate policy and action and industrial policy and industrial development initiatives. So that is at the heart of it, developing those positive nexus. Internship attachments in partner organizations. We, SPRC, would support our partners in reaching out to the green industrialization stakeholders in Islamabad and vice versa. We would be very happy to offer our office space and secretarial support to our partners when they come to Islamabad. We would like to have joint publications, joint conferences and seminars and exhibitions, bring out Pakistan Journal of Green Industrialization, and establish national, regional, and international partnerships. I have already spoken to NED, UED Texla, UED Lahore, NUST, and Punjab University, and they have all very happily joined hands at the institutional level, but we have gathered the interest of the participants at the individual level. Would like to have a lot of professionals with that also, and I'm glad to report that there is an overwhelming support from the people sitting in the hall to join hands to promote green industrialization in Pakistan, which is the objective of this conference. I thank you all for that support, and in this support, in this effort of getting a better deal for our people, citizens within Pakistan, and for Pakistan to get a better deal from the international community and Committee of Nations, we have our front warrior, one would say, that is our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I'm very happy on behalf of the conference, UNCTAD, myself, that Additional Secretary UN, Syed Haider Shah, is with us and has sat through the concluding session. So it's my pleasure to invite him to come and share your thoughts about this and conclude the conference also. Thank you. Syed Haider Shah.
Assalamu alaikum. So thank you very much. Dr. Safdar Sohail has been my teacher and mentor. A lot of respect for him. Thank you very much, sir, for this invitation, and the discourse has been very enriching and illuminating for me. I think it has covered and touched on almost all the issues in one way or another. There is precious little that I can add to it. My prepared remarks, I think, once again, would be inadequate to the occasion. So I was supposed to speak on the loss and damage fund, but having listened to the comments and the discussion and the level and the direction in which it proceeded, I feel I need to improvise a little and modulate my comments accordingly. I would limit myself to speaking about the loss and damage fund and the discussion in the COP28, which are going to happen in a month's time from now. And also I would like to make a few comments about the discussion today. Briefly about this fund and what we expect from the discussions which are going to take place in UAE next month, at the end of next month, and in early December, as Pakistan played an important role as the chair of G77 plus China last year in having in getting the agreement to set up this fund. Now there is in the process since last year there has been a transitional committee, and it has been working on it, and they are trying to establish it hopefully by this year. There are many issues. I would just quickly flag the issues that we want to be addressed through that fund, and some of them are related to that it must be for the vulnerable countries, and the fund should play a central role in the systemic global response to losses and damage caused by climate change, and that all vulnerable countries should be eligible to receive funds from it. No country should be excluded. The debate about grants versus debt or loans, innovative finance, not to kind of replace the public grant-based finance by developed countries, to ensure alignment of the eligibility criteria with the existing framework within the UNFCCC and Paris Agreement, and not to create sub-funds which would earmark funds for particular activities, and that would be at the cost of support for climate-related projects, that it must be driven by the parties, the fund, and that it should also cover all sorts of climate exigencies, not only immediate events, but also slow onset events should also be covered under that. And it should ensure direct and rapid access for national governments of vulnerable developing countries facing extreme weather events. And then again, the principle of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. These are important points that we, as a country, would be looking for during the discussions, and trying to kind of incorporate them in whatever arrangements emerge as a result of the agreement between different countries which are members of the COP. Now, about the discussion today, I would like to zoom out a little, because there is, I feel, some people, speakers have commented on that there is a risk of lapsing into a discussion which is very esoteric and which is not intelligible to the common people. And I think climate change remains by and large, except from anecdotal outbursts here and there, it's not very much ingrained in the public imagination or perception as something which would necessitate a change in their lifestyle, or for governments, or for donors, or for industry. So that awareness is lacking. I would see the discussion. There's an arbitrary taxonomy that I would resort to, and that would divide the issue into three major issues. One was about the funding that we discussed today, and in this stream, we were discussing the sources of funding, the need for funding, for instance. What is the requirement? And there are different estimates, and it depends from whichever angle you look at it. So it's 10 trillion or more or less, the sources of funding, where it is going to come from, and then the third aspect of it is the management of those funds, how they're going to be managed, what institutional arrangements are you going to have, which body is going to have it. COP is one, this loss and damage fund is another framework for that. How it is going to be distributed, which countries are going to be could be eligible for that, That's an important aspect of that discussion. And lastly, the effectiveness question. All these aspects have been touched by participants. So how effective this stream of funding would be for climate change discourse. The second stream would be about the actors and actions. It's a very broad thing, very, I mean, again, I would say very arbitrary, but it focuses on us, the human beings, and our collections, the industry or the businesses or the governments. What do we do? What actions we take? That's very, very important, because the first question of financing stream is entirely linked to what we do as individuals or as collectives. In our different incarnations, in our different roles, and we discussed, for instance, in somebody gave an example of the private sector leading in importing significant amounts of solar energy equipment. One key factor, and it was also pointed out, one key factor was the individual realization of the cost effectiveness of that import. That it would be, and now I have many friends in their discussions, it's a very favorite topic, that we have installed solar panels at our residence, and how effective and how efficient it is, how much it costs, and how beneficial it is. So this shows, and it is not, frankly, I mean, I did not discuss, and so far in my conversations, I have not met people who have said that they have done it for environment. No, they have done it for profit motive, for economy, for reasons of saving money, for have a more reliable source of energy. So it's not that. And many of our policies and actions, even when they are described and labeled as green, they are green in name. The motive, the intention, the idea, the inspiration is something other than the climate. I mean, we may, like, for instance, somebody, we had a presentation, somebody said that Pakistan, and today it was also mentioned that there is a nationally determined contribution target is 1/3, 30% of the energy should be through renewable energy. And somebody said, we already produce more than 30% through hydropower projects, so box ticked. We have done it. We have already, I mean, passed the target. So it's very easy, I mean, to play through these tricks and box-ticking exercises. The last stream of looking at this issue is fairly important. I think it's a bit philosophical. You cautioned against the theoretical frameworks and the macro approaches and focusing instead on more practical aspects. But I think the link is there. Our ethical models, our legal models are very much based on sources or in ways which impede our understanding of the damage to climate. For instance, ownership issue. So the very concept of our morality is based on what you do, and what if you do something wrong, you are responsible. But so it's very easy for us to evade that responsibility. The developed country says, we didn't do it. We can say, we didn't do it. And every individual in his or her way of life would say that we haven't done it. So that passing the buck has been there. Humanity has not been, I mean, a pessimistic view of it is, we have not been very, very skillful in terms of tackling very successfully with the issues we are confronted with. War is there, poverty is there, injustice is there, inequity is there. So climate change has been there, but it has now resurfaced as in a more aggravated form. Unfortunately, our software is not designed to deal with these issues in that way. When it comes to justice, we make compromises. When it comes to governance, we make compromises. And unfortunately, we are looking for a compromise with nature also. We are saying 1.5 or 2 degrees, would you be okay? Unfortunately, nature does not work that way. So our compromise habit of trying to co-opt others through coercion or through persuasion, probably it would not work with the nature. We have to be more realistic in terms of the world, and until and unless we own up to the environment, to the world that we all share, which again I'm aware is not possible to kind of convince people to change their lifestyles, change their ways of the culture. So we are stuck with that. It's a bit pessimistic note, but it's probably a bit closer to reality also. So thank you very much, sir, for inviting me, and my best wishes to you and your organization for providing this platform for such a lively and rich discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Haider, and I must add that if we continue having officers like him and have many more like him, ending at it's not a pessimistic note, it's a kind of a reality check that this is also important. Culture is also important, and moving forward is also important. So thank you very much for your thoughtful remarks and sharing Pakistan's position at the forthcoming COP also, and we wish this time it would be you, wish you well in COP 28. And now at the very end, before I invite Dr. Ejaz for the vote of thanks, I again invite Richard for his parting words at the end of the conference.
Thank you. I won't keep you long between the panel and your stomach. Let me just thank, first of all, Dr. Sohail and his colleagues who have, it's always difficult putting on an event, especially for us from thousands of miles away. So it does really require a collaborative effort. And I think we've benefited from extremely good working relationships with the Center and with Dr. Sohail and all the colleagues that are working on the technology side and the logistical side of that. In that context, I have to thank my colleagues who I'm free riding off, really. They do all the hard work. Gul and Maria and Kara, they put in the hours to make sure that we do put something together that is beneficial for all of you. And we couldn't do this without the contribution of all the panelists. That's true of this morning's panel. It's true of the panels yesterday. We will absorb all the comments and questions and work them into the final products that we hope to generate from this workshop and the related workshops in other countries that are involved in the project. And of course, thanks to the audience too. You all stayed here very diligently for yesterday's session and this morning's session. And it's clear from the questions and the comments that we've received that there's a genuine interest, concern, commitment to finding ways of dealing with these multiple problems now that developing countries, including, of course, Pakistan, are facing in a difficult environment for governments, for businesses, for households. So thank you all for your participation too. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Big hands for the Geneva team. I remember a small thing that Dr. Unal had been reminding me again and again, who is the project in charge, that involve more ladies in the organization of the conference and bring volunteers, lady volunteers from other universities. And you must have seen that it is natural now in Pakistan. Our ladies, mashallah, are so active and more reliable also, I would say, at the cost of my own gender. So our experience with them, our team, organization team, has been fabulous. Many universities sent their volunteers, very, very happy about that. Over to you, Dr. Ejaz, who is the director of this conference, and I personally should thank him. It was his show, big organization, so thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Hello again. It's been such an honor to be the host and organizer of this wonderful conference on green industrialization. in partnership with UNCTAD. This would not have been possible without the support of our valued partner UNCTAD. On behalf of Executive Director SPRC, Dr. Safdar Sohail, myself and my very hard-working team, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to all the partners and stakeholders, academia, industry, government, and all the dignitaries who participated in the discussions and deliberations in these 2 days. Lastly, I would like to request you to give a big hand for my team, which has been working tirelessly in last weeks or so. So Alishba is here, please say hi. Thank you so much. So this is the official closure of the conference, and before I finish my vote of thanks, I have 2 announcements, one for the transport. The guests who are from outside Islamabad, please get in touch with your respective POCs. And second announcement is about the finance office, that our finance representative is sitting for those who have reimbursement cases. Thank you so much. Have a nice rest of the day. Our lunch is being served on the left side. There's hall, and the staff of the hotel would guide. Thank you.